Now, every 4 years, Nigeria holds general elections to elect leaders that will steer the affairs of the country. The season is almost here again, and a lot of aspirants are gearing up, and political parties will be facing a big task in selecting their candidates. The Independent National Electoral Commission has expressed concern over the insecurity rocking different parts of the country. It says there is still time for security agencies to express or to address the challenges and improve security before the 2023 elections and secure the nation for elections to take place nationwide. Now let's talk this through by speaking via Zoom from Abuja is a security expert and managing director, Beacon Consulting Nigeria, Kabir Adamo. Thank you so much for joining us on TVC Breakfast. Let's begin by looking at the development bordering on breach of peace here and there in Nigeria. We've got the issue of banditry, terrorism in the north. We've got IPOB, uprisings in the south, in the east, and here in the south, we've got a lot of issues too, pockets of issues here and there, cultism, etc. What do you think? What impact do you think this might have on the coming elections?
Well, good morning, and I hope you had a good weekend. The reality is that Nigeria is challenged by non-state actors in several fronts who, for some reason, do not recognize the supremacy of the use of force by the state. And so for that reason, across the various regions, you have the types of security threats that you've mentioned, banditry, secessionist agitation, militancy, criminal behavior. Now, my consultancy releases a report every month where we analyze these trends and we present these threats. Now, in April, our latest of this report, we documented about 1,500 deaths across the various regions. Now, these deaths, unfortunately, affect Nigerians, including those who are doing civic duties like INEC voter registration as an example. You recall when in the southeast, workers of INEC who were doing voter registration were attacked, and if I'm right, one of them was killed. So unfortunately, these security threats do affect operational issues, both for government the organizations as well as for profit organizations, sometimes even stopping them from carrying out these functions. After the incident in the southeast, INEC had to suspend its operations. So that's the kind of unfortunate operational environment that we're going into the elections, with.
Well, the latest was from the INEC boss, Mahmoud Yakubu, who said that the security situations might affect the conduct of the elections. We've got elections that are quite nigh. But do you think, with things, with the situation of things, what we are looking at ground, there is good enough time to tackle these security challenges before the elections?
So it depends. It's a good thing that INEC is meeting with stakeholders, and the latest stakeholder it met, it was the Interagency Consultative Committee on Election Security, which is co-chaired by the Inspector General of Police and the National Security Advisor. Now, we, as an enterprise security risk management specialist, which is my specialty, I'm very worried that INEC doesn't seem to have responsibility for something as critical as security. The narrative coming from the INEC chair is that responsibility is with the security agencies. And when I dug a little bit further, I discovered that perhaps the reason is that the department that is responsible for security in INEC does not understand this concept of risk management. So yes, it's possible that we can change the narrative. The essence of enterprise security risk management is to lower the risk. So INEC need to assume responsibility for this risk management. And the best way it can do that is to enhance the capacity of that department. Now, because there is no time, one of the easiest things INEC can do is to engage consultants. I am also aware that INEC has a tool which it got from the EU for election risk management. So the implementation of that tool, I think, is the way to go, allowing other organizations outside INEC. INEC is independent. Now, if it's independent, it needs to assume that responsibility. So contracting that responsibility, as it were, to organizations outside INEC actually questions this independence that INEC is supposed to have. You recall when in previous elections, something as small as logistics made us to extend the date of the elections. Now, that is risk management. Risk management would have identified that as a gap and would have closed it. So in essence, yes, we can correct it, but only if INEC changes the manner with which it embraces and manages risk. We can support in that regard by our enterprise security risk management function.
Let's look at these security indices, one at a time. Let's start from the north, where we've got issue of kidnapping, banditry, terrorism, which is rampant. And we've got a lot of people who are displaced in different IDP camps. Do you think that we are doing enough to to capture the breach of peace in those particular areas in the country? And then, is it possible for us to do what we did in 2015, to bring in mercenaries, as one of the governors of the northern part, the Kaduna State precisely, the governor of Kaduna State, who said we can bring in mercenaries, or he would even bring in mercenaries if things continue to go awry? Do you think that's something that we can actually explore this time round?
Let me start responding to your question from the back end. Now, we know what the threat is. In every risk management function, one of the first things you want to do is to identify the threat. In this instance, we know the threat, and when I opened my remarks, I mentioned non-state actors. In almost all the locations in Nigeria, that is the threat. Now, to deal with that threat, you need to go after that threat. Waiting for that threat to attack and then you respond is not the way to go. Now, if engaging private contractors or mercenaries is one of the ways to go after that threat, then I'm all for it. However, private contractors do have their challenges. In the Nigerian context, one of the major challenges I know we'll have is how do we manage these private contractors, which is the same issue we're having with our security agencies. I am of the view that it's not because we don't lack numbers or even capacity and sometimes capability. I think the challenge is actually management. So if we change this approach, this attitude, where we wait for the threat factors to strike and then we now attempt to react or defend ourselves, then unfortunately, even the private contractors, if we engage them and approach the security challenges in that manner, then we will not be able to solve the problem. We need to go after the threat factors. We need to uproot them. Where we can arrest them, we arrest them. Where we need to kill them, we kill them. Anything short of that, unfortunately, we not do. If mercenaries will help us in doing that in a well-managed atmosphere where accountability is apparent, then I'm for it. If, unfortunately, we're going to continue with the manner we're managing security now, where accountability is almost lacking. I mentioned that 1,400 plus persons died in April, and I'm not aware that one single security official was held responsible for that death. Then, unfortunately, even mercenaries will not help our situation. All
right, the issue of the IDPs that I mentioned, is it possible for us to, we know that some people have not been resettled. In Borno State, some have actually been resettled to their homes, but some are still, in the IDP camps. Is it possible? Should we go ahead and conduct elections in all of those camps and ensuring that security in that place is not breached during elections?
Now, even though this is not my forte, but I know based on my interaction with INEC, these are concerns. Now, elections can be held in those camps, but the question is, what is the integrity? Let's not forget that we are after free, fair, credible elections. So it's not just to hold the elections, but how do we guarantee these three elements? Free, fair, and credible. If you hold elections in a camp that is managed by the government, now that government belongs to a particular ruling party. That government has been feeding and catering and taking care of those people in that camp. What is the likelihood that that already has influenced how they are going to vote? How will the other elements, the other parties feel about that? Now, those are questions that both the political parties and INEC would need to address. As a security risk management expert, I can tell you that elections can be held, but whether those elections will be credible and free and fair is unfortunately what I, as a risk management expert, cannot answer. It would be INEC and the political parties that would need to drive that forward.
Before we go to the East, there in the North, we know that we've had the CDS also raising the alarm that there are saboteurs in the Nigerian army. Some of the soldiers are now becoming mutually suspicious about their colleagues. They don't know who is selling out, selling out to the terrorist, who is making it easy for the terrorists to attack them. How do you think we've been able to tackle this issue, or what strategy do you think can be brought to the table to ensure that my fellow soldier in the battlefield is not also compromised?
The banks have what they call KYC, I think, know your customers. In security environments, we have what we call vetting and background checks. Now, in high secured environments, such as the military and the several other security departments that we have, as far as I know, their operational laws requires both pre-employment vetting as well as while they are working. Now, in pre-employment vetting, you check the background of the person, you try to identify red flags, and then in the post-employment vetting, you also try to identify red flags. Example of red flags is, as an example, maybe the person's spouse is seen driving vehicles that are beyond the person's income, or is seen traveling all over the world and posting on social media about, the kind of acquisition of wealth or exposure to certain environments that would be questionable. So those are the kind of things that will help us to identify the possibility of infiltrators, fifth columnists, and other insiders that are truncating our objective in terms of both counterterrorism and other security objectives. Unfortunately, in my experience, we've not been doing enough of that. First off, we've not been doing enough of the pre-employment vetting. Even when we're doing it, it's so procedural that it does not really identify those red flags that I talked about. And even where we do it sometimes, it's been influenced by certain individuals within the system who, for one reason or the other, would want that individual, even when those red flags are identified. A good red flag, as an example, is drug addiction. You don't want someone who you know is addicted to substances, including alcohol and drug, into the security organizations. You don't want to train that person in weapon handling, and then you hand over a weapon to him when you know that he could be high on a drug, and then, shoot.
Right. Let's go to the East, where we have, in the Southeast, where we've got the independent, the IPOB members and the ESN military arm of that non-state actor. They are asking for what they've been asking for many years, saying that they want a secession, they want to go on their own, and that issue of sit-at-home order. Another one is also being bandied around social media, saying there will be sit-at-home so and so date. Even there have been much more denials from IPOB themselves, saying that they are not doing sit-at-home again. So the forth and back has been there, and the president said that they should allow the court to, they should allow the issue to run its course in the court. So what do you think we need to do, INEC and security agencies need to do to bring this, to bring this to ensure that there is peace during election in the Southeast, precisely?
Okay, in the case of INEC, unfortunately, in my opinion, it's the case of which comes first, the chicken or the egg. INEC needs to guarantee credible elections so that the people elect whoever they want to represent them at all levels, at the federal, at the state, and at the local government level. That would be the first basis that will guarantee peace. If people have individuals that they feel they voted for, they would trust that individual to a large extent, and they will allow that individual to walk the processes of guaranteeing peace. Number two is the security agencies. The security agencies have a responsibility to address the challenge. And it takes me back to my earlier statement, identifying the threat factor. It is unfathomable that in 2022, we're using the term unknown gunmen. How can we have intelligence organizations that are paid budgetary allocations, huge sums of money, to actually identify these things, and then we still use this term unknown gunmen? It is not acceptable in current day security practices. The intelligence agencies need to do their work, identify those that are the pawns let me use a chess game as an example. I'm aware that there are pawns. I'm aware that there are kings. I'm aware that there are queens. So the security agencies would need to identify everyone who is involved. Those that are backing this so-called threat element, those that are funding them, those that are providing strategic direction from them, as well as the politicians who have weaponized violence in an attempt to achieve an objective. Once intelligence does that work and puts all of this on the table, then it will now allow law enforcement to do its work. Start by arresting those that are involved, presenting with clear evidence to the court for their prosecution. And then, of course, governance. At the root of all of this is grievances. Now, if governance steps in to identify first and address those grievances, then it will allow these other two that I mentioned to do their work. So it's a multifaceted issue. It's not just something that you sit down and all of these three functions will have to be achieved. Yeah,
really. Well, as a matter of fact, coming down to the south here, the two off-cycle governorship elections are upon us. And first is in Ekiti on June the 18th and Osun State, July the 16th. Do all indications show that things should go well security-wise?
Unfortunately, no. We have a set of criteria. When I talked about enterprise security risk management, you start by identifying the possible triggers, including those threat factors that I mentioned. In the case of the two states, both Ekiti and Osun, part of the major concerns we have, first off, the incumbency factor. Then the second element is the transparency and the fairness with which the primary elections were held. In both the two major dominant political parties, the APC and the PDP, their primaries were not seen to be free and fair. And we, as a media person, I know you monitored the outcome of those primaries. You saw the grievances, the agitations by some of those who participated in the process. And that is the foundation, unfortunately, for violence in almost all elections in Nigeria. The third element is the presence of non-state actors that are participating in the security processes for the election. So you have youths who are armed, who politicians sometimes engage and use against their opponents. Already we've seen targeted attacks in the two occasions, both Ekiti and Osun, against political opponents. Then the fourth element is the gaps within the security architecture that allows these non-state actors to carry out their activities. And those gaps are sometimes as a result of capacity and then as a result of capability. The fifth element is the inability of INEC to express or implement some of the provisions of the Electoral Act, including, for instance, voter manipulation by the use of money and other incentivization. So all of this, including several other factors, unfortunately tells me that unless if we change what exists at the moment, the possibility of violence before, during, and post the elections is high.
Your analysis actually leaves much to be desired when it comes to, the ability to ensure smooth, free and fair elections. But what role do you think political parties, just like you said, can play or are playing to ensure smooth elections? For instance, the APC, as part of the undertakings, directed the nominees, presidential nominees generally, to take oaths not to engage in thuggery, anti-party activities, factionalization, or the creation of parallel congresses and party organs at any level. You think this would be helpful for peace?
It's a good step, but an oath without any sanction would not do it in any part of the world, especially in Nigeria, where they've tried in the past and they have succeeded. I mentioned that some politicians have weaponized violence, and I say this with all sense of responsibility. Like I told you, I run an enterprise security risk management firm, and we do document all of these functions. So everything I've said is based on trends analysis from that data, and data doesn't lie. Now, as it were, politicians have weaponized violence. They've tried it in the past, and they've seen it's successful. Now, unless if the political parties sanction these politicians, just oaths will not do enough. So we have to see in a very clear and transparent manner where there are violations, then those violations are meted with penalties. And where the political parties fail to do that, then INEC should step in and then also sanction those political parties. Anything short of that, unfortunately, will not give us what we want. There is this common balance, which I picked up from Europe, that trust is good, but control is better. So yes, oaths are good, and they signed that. And I know INEC also, through the Interagency Consultative Committee on Election Security at both the federal, state, and local levels, also engages in that kind of agreements, or call them whatever we want to call them. But that's not enough. We need to follow it up with sanctions where there are violations.
Well, very quickly, before I let you go, if the security issue continues to linger, would it be appropriate to extend the tenure of President Muhammad Buhari, or install an interim government, just like we've had some senior advocates, advocated that we should extend at least for 6 months to put an interim government and put in place the proper constitution, or put in place whatever it is that has been our issues of disintegration. Would you also subscribe to that?
As an enterprise security risk management specialist, that call by senior advocates, first off, I think they've forgotten the basis upon which they are operating. They are constitutional, most of them are constitutional lawyers, and as far as I'm concerned, there is no provision within the Constitution, except if we're in a war situation. That's a little I know about the legal provisions for that. I'm not a lawyer, so I don't want to go into that. But as an enterprise security risk management, I can tell you that that scenario would create more challenges in terms of security risks than what we have at the moment. The grievances that drive insecurity in Nigeria will be accentuated by any elongation of any tenure, including that of President Buhari.
Security expert and managing director, Beacon Consulting Nigeria, Kabir Adamu, thank you so much for your keenness of insight this morning on TVC Breakfast.
Thank you for having me.